having a conversation with someone very special who has worked with AI research teams in various big tech companies such as Walmart, Microsoft, Google, and now he's with Facebook. His name is Bodhisattva Majumdar. He's also an author of NLP book called Practical Natural Language Processing, which has been admired by industry and academia. During this conversation, we will discuss Bodhi's experience working with this AI teams in different big tech companies, and we'll also discuss the current and future trends in NLP. We'll also take some questions from our viewers. So let's get started. So Bodhisattva, thanks for coming on the call. I know you work for Facebook AI research team, but unfortunately, you won't be able to discuss all of that because the work that you're doing is not public yet. But let's talk about your experience with Google and Microsoft and a few other big companies that you have worked with before.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to share my experience in your channel Code Basics. So I'm Bodhisattva. I'm a PhD candidate at University of California, San Diego, working with machine learning and natural language processing. So far, I've worked with great companies and research labs such as Google AI, Microsoft Research. Currently, I'm interning at Facebook AI Research, and previously I also worked at Walmart Labs in India. So yeah, just to summarize, I think since I'm an academician till now, I think kind of experience I have gained from industry is very different, and it often relies upon the fact that how do you come up with like a complete pipeline that usually work in practice. For example, different ways of implementing different models are different in industry, which is not definitely true for any research project that you work on in PhD, because the skill matters, the kind of data availability that matters, the domain matters, and all of these kind of changes when you go to hop into different industry. Yeah, so in brief, I think my academic experience and my industrial experience are kind of complementary, and as a whole, I think it gives me a lot of good overview about the field and where it is kind of heading.
Got it. So you were working mainly in, I think, NLP projects, right, at Google and Microsoft?
Yeah, that's correct. I mainly was dealing with textual data, so you could
Mhm.
call them like NLP. Yeah, but I've worked on different ways of handling them. For example, starting from understanding textual inputs and to generating natural language for users, for example, like dialogue systems.
So, okay, we understood you were worked in NLPs, but would you be able to talk a little more about those projects that you did at Google and
Yeah.
Microsoft?
Yeah, for sure. I think we worked on a very interesting and practical problem at Google AI. The paper was published in ACL, so you could take a look at that later. But yeah, the problem was mainly extracting information from documents that have templates. For example, invoices, bills, or forms. For example, let's say if we are given like a printed version of a form or like a PDF of a form, how could we extract important information? Like, okay, what is the invoice date? What is the invoice amount? What is the due amount? What is the due date, etc. Right? And how could you process that these kind of documents automatically at scale? And we dealt the problem in even in a more challenging setting where we said that okay, you only have annotations or, for example, ground truths of these extraction for very few documents. So how could you actually learn from very few annotations and really scale it up for large scale prediction? So we worked on that problem. We came up with like a representation learning based approach where you learn these generic representation that helps you to understand the template that is present in the document and then figure out the kind of information that you are looking for. And we have tried with data sets data sets from inside Google, like data sets that is proprietary to Google, and then data set that is out there in the public, and then we showed that our model generalizes pretty well across data sets. Yeah.
Nice. Because availability of training data set is a bigger problem in the
Yes.
industry. And if you can tackle that problem with a very small amount of training data set, then that's like the best thing.
Yes. Yes. For sure. Yeah.
since you have a lot of experience in NLP and it's kind of your domain, let's talk about some of the current and future trends in NLP. So I'll start with GPT-3. When GPT-3 came out, many people were excited, but at the same time, a lot of people were worried. They were like, oh, we are going to lose our jobs. So what are your thoughts on those discussions that people have?
Yeah. I mean, let me start from like a very philosophical understanding about the field of AI, and that kind of I believe. I really think that the main purpose of AI is to be assistive, but not really kind of like a replacement of the things that we do in our daily life, right? So the main motive or the main purpose of these AI models to assist users to achieve certain things that are probably very difficult to achieve right now, or maybe it takes a lot of time. So we really want to cut that amount of the time cost or the other kind of human effort cost using these AI systems intelligently, right? So coming with that same philosophy, if you look at GPT-3, the main idea of using GPT-3 is to really solve, not really not really solve, yeah, but kind of solve the task of uh, having like a very intelligent and efficient assistive system. So let's take an example, right? Uh, let's say you are an user, you want to write a review of a product in Amazon, right? Now it's possible that you are coming from a different geographical background, different linguistic background, and let's say you want to write a review in English, and let's say maybe you are not an English like a native speaker, right? Now to really convey your thought in a specific language like English, let's say you want to use a certain assistive system, and let's say GPT-3 is there to help you. So for example, let's say if we can build a capability that okay, you give your thoughts in little in a bits and pieces and in concepts and whatever, and GPT-3 kind of allow you to complete that sentence so that it looks like it's very fluent. Anyone from the world who are interested or whomever they are concerned, they can actually understand while reading that review, and so that it actually serves the purpose of writing the review so that it helps other users, etc., right? So that is the way how we want to use GPT. Now that's not really replacing any job, right? Or that's not really changing anything. That's essentially helping us to achieve something more that takes a lot of time or a lot of human cost. Yeah.
I think the point you made is similar to what Elon Musk talked about in his famous Joe Rogan interview, where they were discussing about Neuralink. I know, like, news media made a big deal out of him smoking vids on that podcast, but they were discussing Neuralink, and Elon Musk's point was it is never AI versus human. It is AI plus humans versus
Yeah.
AI. So it's like you're
Yeah.
augmenting yourself. You're creating like a
Absolutely.
cyborg almost with the help of AI. And I think that's the way people need to think about AI in general. If they think about AI as a competition, I don't think they're doing any good to themselves.
Yeah. Totally. I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Now, do you see even more powerful language models emerging? Like previously there was BERT, GPT-2, then GPT-3 came in, which has even more capabilities. Do you see any more powerful models, not in terms of where you're training data set, but the architecture? NLP domain has seen so much advancement starting from RNN to transformer. So do you see any new advancements coming in this area?
Yeah, I mean, I would still say that these are all great improvement and probably the much needed improvement that our field needed, right? I mean, there will be always kind of a research effort that will keep improving this architecture and making them more efficient, making them less, training sensitive, like training data sensitive, and probably more generalizable, right? I think that was the main fundamental goal of coming up with these architectures that kind of solve problems across the board. So yeah, I mean, eventually, eventually, by theory, we could come up with more powerful language model with more data and more parameters, for example, or even coming up with like more complex architectures. But I think what is also very important, at least as far as like the NLP field is concerned, because that I can talk about, is basically how we are effectively using these models in a downstream task. And eventually, we really want to see that are these downstream tasks are actually helpful to the user or not. So I can talk about like a very interesting aspect of all these machine learning models that we are currently looking at very closely is explainability, right? I mean, we have AI systems deployed everywhere, right? Now to make them really accessible to the users who do not know anything about machine learning, for example, or who do not understand the nitty gritty behind these models, they still want to trust these AI models and really trust their predictions, right? Whatever they generate, or trust their recommendations. How could we achieve that? One of the way we could achieve that, we are thinking currently, is coming up with explanations of each of the prediction that we make. So for example, if an AI model can make a prediction and say that, hey, I have made this prediction because I think this and this. So
Hmm.
these extra explanations going to be like an extra check on that prediction. Like whenever, let's say, I'm like a naive user, I don't understand anything about machine learning. When I look at the prediction, I see the explanation, and I actually kind of do like a brain work saying that, okay, the AI is saying that it has made this prediction because of this and this and this explanation, and that makes sense. So it's probably more trustworthy to kind of go with that AI. So these kind of things are very important, and language models are again playing a very important role there, because you could think of coming up with these explanations using like a very powerful language model, and these language models are already very well grounded with a lot of knowledge, facts, common sense, etc. Right? So you could efficiently use these language models to come up with explanations for machine learning predictions that will eventually make these AI systems more accessible and trustworthy to the experts, or to the even users who are actually using it.
And more than users, I think it helps the business stakeholder. So if I'm working in an organization, if my
Yeah,
business manager doesn't know about AI, and if he wants to fund the project, let's say he or she wants to spend $few million on the project, if there is an explainable AI, then that helps us win the trust of these stakeholders.
yeah, exactly. I mean, essentially, it will help all the stakeholders of these models, including experts who are actually building that model. They will know that, okay, how the model is actually working, where the model is failing, and why the model is failing. Because you can think of that these explanations could be like a debugging tool to understand where the model is failing and why the model is failing. Because now
Hmm.
you have more understanding about how the model works or the model is thinking to make the prediction. That's one thing for the experts. For other stakeholders, yes, I mean, they can, yeah, take more informed decision about this prediction based on these explanations. And again, it's same for the users at the end of this pipeline, who are actually going to benefit it from this prediction, saying that, hey, I mean, they will be more happy to use this system, or they will probably, it will be more accessible to them.
Are there any tools available in terms of explainable AI? Like I was just coding BERT right now using TensorFlow. So I have a nice, text classification model built. But
Yeah,
does
so
TensorFlow or PyTorch come up with any kind of tools around
yeah so
explainable AI?
so you could, I mean, there are different kind of explanations you can think of. For example, I think there's something called gradcam that has become very popular in computer vision. It basically gives you an attention map over the input image, basically saying that, okay, which part of the image the model were actually focusing or attending to make that prediction, right? So let's say you are doing like a captioning task. Let's say a dog is running through a field, and let's say the model actually looks at the dog while writing the word dog. Then you know that, okay, the model is actually doing what it needs to be, right? I mean, you can think of similar stuff, that highlighting different part of a customer review when you are predicting if it's like a sentiment positive, or it's a sentiment negative, right? For example, if you see eventually that model is looking at the right positive words or right negative words to make that prediction, then you know that, okay, the model is doing what it needs to be or what it's supposed to be. So there are a couple of frameworks that exist. I don't know if they're actually integrated in TensorFlow or PyTorch right now, but I know there are frameworks that are built on TensorFlow or PyTorch. For example, there's something called um, uh, yeah, Eraser. I think not really Eraser. There's something called I forgot the name, but I can send you the link later. I mean, you can edit it.
Yeah,
But there is a,
if you can send all those links, we'll put in a video description so that people have access to those.
yeah. And there is a very popular framework called Lime, Lime. So Lime was built mainly for even any machine learning models. I mean, and these are based on like kind of understanding the predictions and changing the input in a way to see that, okay, what change in the input make a change in the output, right? So it's basically kind of like a susceptibility of the model towards an input, like how sensitive a model is towards the input, right? So
Hmm.
I mean, that helps a lot in kind of debugging this model, making this model more guarded from the adversarial attacks. Because you could think of, this is also a very interesting discussion, I would say, that you could think of like a model, like a bot that is deployed out there, right? And And like adversarial attacks that can happen to machine learning models, like if even if you make like small changes to the input which are unrecognizable by the human, but really can change the output of the model. So you really have no idea that what a bad example look like, because you always work with good examples in your training data, right? So
Mhm.
and just changing, like, so there is a very interesting work that shows that with these text classification models like BART, you can add like a random gibberish word in front of every sentence in your prediction, and it will drop the accuracy from 90% to less than 10%, just adding that
Oh.
random word. So you could think of that there is an attacker who is sitting somewhere, and whenever you're passing like an input through your cloud computing engine where it actually will hit the bot eventually, it somehow adds that random word somewhere like in the middle of the pipeline, and when it eventually hits your model, it basically input with that random word which doesn't have any meaning, but it can drastically change the output quality of your model. Eventually that will break the model. So all of these are very important, and hopefully explainable AI or explainable machine learning systems would be able to detect, saying that, hey, I can detect something new in the input, and that's why I'm making the change of the prediction. So once you look at, so yeah, I mean, for example, it can still give you a good prediction or a bad prediction, but if you look at the explanation, you will see that, oh, this explanation doesn't really make any sense. Let me
Mm.
check back to the what really happened with the input, or maybe you just discard that output. So that
Mm.
could be really helpful.
Great. Now, do you see NLP affecting businesses and our life in general big time? So, in terms of our implications of NLP on our real life, what are the future
Mhm.
trends that you see coming in next 5 years?
Since I work on interactive systems and dialogue systems,
Mm.
I would like to believe that interactive systems is one of the future trends that I can see in the NLP. There could be many other things. For example, a more generalizable and future learning, explainable AI, and etc. So let's talk about one, interactive systems. I think interactive system is going to be the future, because eventually, if we want to envision a future where we have AI deployed anywhere, for example, as an assistant in the self-driving car, or even like an assistant in any other processes that we do every day. For example, writing an email, or maybe you are doing some creative writing, or anything you can think of. And when you think of this AI as an assistive system, ideally it should be interactive, right? I mean, it should not be like one shot. Okay, it takes the input, it gives you an output, it stops there. So you have no idea what is that output, what does that mean, and if you are not happy with that output, you cannot really interact with the AI system. So ideally, we would like the AI system to be interactive, so that, okay, once you see some output from a machine learning model, you should be able to say that, okay, I like this output, or I don't like this output, and then you can reason out, saying that why you don't like that output, and then you can actually ideally critique with an AI system, right? I mean, that's the ideal goal. I mean, that's where we can say that, okay, we have created something that is at par with the way human works, right? That you will
Yeah,
be
I was
able to
going to just say that, like, this is how humans build the knowledge.
exactly,
When we two
exactly,
are interacting, talking about NLP, in my brain, my
exactly.
neurons are adjusting and I'm kind of building now. So, wow, I did not know about that. Okay, so there is
Yeah,
work going on in that area.
yeah, essentially, I mean, that's where we are heading. I think making these conversational systems and interactive systems, like for example, think of chatbot, right? We all have
Mm.
seen chatbots in many apps. Like I think currently all food ordering apps has like a inbuilt chatbot where you can just chat, saying that, oh, where is my order, where is my like the delivery person, what is his location, etc., right? But you should be able to do more than that. I can give you a very interesting example that I've been thinking recently. For example, I think we all go to various video streaming platforms like Netflix, etc., and Netflix comes up with its automatic recommendation, saying that, okay, here are the set of movies that you might like today, right, based on your previous surfing history or whatever. But it's possible that you may not like that recommendation at that very point of time. You may say that, oh no, I don't like this. Even if it reflects me, I don't like this recommendation, because I'm in a mood of watching like a rom-com today, or watching like a thriller movie today, right? How would you communicate that back to this engine? Because there is no way you could communicate it. It's one way. It's always coming from the AI to you. Now imagine that there is a way to interact with these recommendation systems, and there is a lot of work that is going on. It's named conversational recommendation systems, where you can actually make a conversation with this recommendation system, saying that, hey, I like your recommendation, but I don't really like this and this aspect of this recommendation. Could you refine your recommendation and give me something new? Right. So there is a ability to critique these systems and saying that, okay, this is the part I like, this is the part I don't like, and how could you give me like better recommendation? And explanation also plays a great part here, because let's say there is a possibility that the AI system making a recommendation and is also giving you an explanation saying that, hey, you have watched rom-com for last 5 days in the week, so I think you are in a kind of spree of watching rom-com movies, and that's why I'm recommending you rom-com movies. And
Hmm.
you can correct the machine saying that, hey, even if I watched rom-com movies for last 5 days, today my friends came over and we want to see like a Marvel movie today. And
Hmm.
you can update that recommendation, providing that input at the real time, talking with that particular AI system. And that really makes these systems really assistive, because it's actually helping you to achieve a goal. The goal is really watching the right
Hmm.
movie with your friends. So yeah, I think that's the future. And that's what I realize is going to help the users a lot,
Hmm.
in terms of like AI making changes in our life.
It could be that I'm watching a lot of entertainment videos on YouTube and my exams are coming. So for 2 months, don't show me any entertainment video recommendation. Maybe show me some coding tutorials or something, Right now,
For sure.
YouTube has that, by the way, but sometimes, when YouTube doesn't show me correct recommendation, I can click on those three dots and say not interested. So the only
Yes.
interaction I'm having is not interested, but I can't say not interested for next 3 months and after that start showing me that.
Yes, or maybe even provided more nuanced input that you are not interested in that, but what are you really interested about? Right?
Hmm.
You could just specify that, saying, oh, I am interested about exam videos, tutorial videos, or whatever, whatnot.
Hmm.
And maybe you could even write that why you are not interested about that. There is
Hmm.
no way to provide that feedback even right now, and that's where the NLP comes into play, because you are going to provide that feedback using your voice, or maybe writing a text message. It cannot be like a
Hmm.
drop down, because essentially you cannot it cannot be like a huge drop down list for every users, right? So you have to write
Yeah.
that in a natural language, so there has to be a way to understand what you say and everything. I mean, all of that is already happening in chatbot, but you could really think of a very cool application of that chatbot in this case, and it could be really helpful. Yeah.
This is amazing. By the way, I have gone through this pain. Uh, Once I visited Hawaii actually. So I was watching a bunch
Hmm.
of Hawaii videos on YouTube, like
Right.
some travel recommendations, some helicopter tour I wanted to do there. And what happened was I came back from Hawaii tour, and even after that, for next 6 months, YouTube kept on showing me those videos. So maybe I
Yeah.
can tell YouTube that, hey, I have visited Hawaii. Don't show me all these videos for next 2 years. Maybe after 2 years, I might visit Hawaii again.
Exactly. Yeah, so there's a great deal of like recommendation diversity versus recommendation fidelity, right? I mean, what YouTube is doing here, like, great job of coming up with recommendation that exactly fits your viewing history, but it's not really coming up with very diverse recommendation. I think YouTube already has recommendation engines that do that, but it doesn't have the ability to accept this feedback from the user at the real time. And this not only opens a challenge or like a problem for AI, but it also opens like a new direction for the UI design. Because if you think about it, the current YouTube UI doesn't allow me to give that feedback at all. So there should be like a fundamental change in the UI that currently YouTube provides, or for that matter, any of these app provides, right? So it's not only a problem of AI itself; it's problem of like the field of HCI, like how the human will interact with the computers, the whole UI folk for them, like how would you make this more seamless and less buggy, etc. So it's very interesting, and that's where we want to go with these AI systems, with these powerful language models, or whatever you call it.
Nice, amazing. Let's talk a little bit about your book. So you wrote this book,
Yeah.
Practical Natural Language Processing, along with
Right.
some co-authors, by the way. One of your co-authors, Anuj Gupta, I interviewed him. We are going to provide a link of that video conversation as well. So let's
Hmm.
talk about the book, whom this book is for, and what are you covering in this book?
Yeah, so I think this book came from this very idea that, okay, what is the difference? Like, we all understand that there is a difference between the kind of research that is coming out every day from academia, from what we are really implementing every day in various industries. And I'm not only talking about big research labs, right? I mean, we are talking about even smaller companies, small size and medium sized companies that every day do this job, or trying to look up to these articles or papers and trying to implement them. So we really wanted to understand and talk about what is the cost of doing that. Like, does it really make sense to go for this biggest model that is available, or you should start differently? And we talked about that a lot in the book. We said that okay, it really depends on the context, right? What problem you are solving, how much data do you have, what domain you are at, and based on that, your strategy will change, right? So
Mm.
the fundamental theme of this book is to coming up with a complete pipeline for any of your business problem that you have at your hand, and how will you go like one step at a time in that pipeline, starting from understanding the problem, formulating the problem, from data collection, from updating your databases, from building a model, and then basically maintaining that model, everything. So if you ask me who is the right audience for this, I think everyone who is trying to do or who are already doing NLP in the industry should benefit from this book. And this book is not only for one particular set of audience. I think there are different sections of this book that are going to be very useful for different part of the audience. For example, like the introductory chapters and the concluding chapters, they talk about very high level about NLP and this pipeline. And I think anyone who is up there in the business, they are looking at the problem from a very high level. They are going to benefit a lot from these chapters. Whereas there is like an engineer, let's say, who knows how to code, and they're entering like a very like a junior engineer who is entering to the industry, and they want to really ramp up on this NLP basics, and what are the different tasks, everything. Then the second section, like the basics of NLP, will be really helpful for them. And then we have a dedicated section for different domains, like e-commerce, healthcare, social media, etc. So let's say if you're an individual who is working in e-commerce and wants to know what are the possible business problems where I can apply NLP and how can we do that, you can actually go to those specific chapters and get a lot of references from it. So yeah, I mean, different part of the book are kind of intended for different audiences, and I think everyone has some of the need in for them in the book. Yeah.
Just to summarize, it is useful to students, entrepreneurs, engineers, kind of everyone. So that's
Yeah, most.
amazing.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend this. I definitely, I should say a disclaimer that this is definitely not written for researchers and who are currently actively doing high level research in NLP, because this is still like a very like, I think the focus of this book is very different. But yeah, I mean, but they might still get some benefits from the references that we provide. We have almost like more than 500 references in that book, so they might get like useful references in that, and they might see that okay, how their research could be helpful in the industry.
Amazing. We'll provide a link of your book website in the video description as well. Now let's move
Perfect.
on to some questions from the viewers. So there is
Yeah.
someone, his YouTube username is me, he's or I don't know, he or she. But the question is, the person is doing MTech, and he or she has done like two good publications as well. So the question is, should I get a PhD? So you're weighing down the option between doing PhD versus doing a job, because they have an offer, good offer, paying offer right now from campus placement. So the person is a little confused, like PhD versus job. And if you do PhD, you know, like what kind of benefits you can get long term.
Yeah, I would say this is really like an individual decision that what you want to do in your life. But I could say like a couple of things that I thought about when I came from industry and joined for a PhD, right? So because I worked before I joined in BSD, and my motivation really was to understand this field mm, from a very close point of view, and really be at the cutting edge and solving some of the fundamental questions I have in my mind, right? So if you have that in your mind that you want to solve certain fundamental questions, like research questions, and you know that you have already learned like required tool for that in your undergraduate or master degree, then I think you should go for a PhD, right? But PhD is kind of like a long-term commitment as well, because you really need to go through these challenges of doing experiments and research, and successes and failures, and it has its own pros and cons. Now, on the other hand, let's say if you don't want to wait for that long, and you know that you know already the tools that you really want to apply them in a real life setting, or like a lot of large scale data, then I think industry is your place. Again, in industry, you can do like, there are research labs where you can do research, for example. But I think it's kind of recommended to have like a more research degree. For example, having like a PhD degree is always beneficial to get into this research roles in industry. At least that's the current trend says. So yeah, I think it's your individual decision, but I think I think it depends like what you want to do. I mean, for example, I mean, you can still build a very interesting profile, and in schools PhD like PhD applications, I mean, most of the advisors are looking for interesting profiles. It's not necessarily has to be strictly like a lot of papers, or if you don't, even if you don't have a papers but have like
Mhm.
a very interesting profile, then some of the advisor might be interested about that as well. So yeah.
One of the question was the person wants to work on Amazon, Google research team, and I guess if you want to work for big firms research team, of course, PhD is going to be very, very helpful.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's going to be very, very helpful. Yeah.
Another question is, does US and Canadian universities provide stipend for a PhD student?
Yeah, I think most of the PhD students are funded by the university. I think it again depends on the kind of offer you get from the university, but I think most of the cases is they will be getting stipends. Yeah.
Athanikar Amy is asking how to explore machine learning startup ideas using natural language processing. So some NLP startup ideas, and people say that data science projects fail 80% of the time. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and that's something that's a very practical question, and that's something we wanted to deal in our book as well. That okay, where these pipeline works and why do they actually fail, right? I mean,
Hmm.
often that we go for the big guns, and we I mean it fails because it takes a lot of time at the inference and blah blah blah. I think what's most important is to coming up with new ideas for a specific domain. I'm sure you are targeting a specific domain when you think about like a startup ideas, that you really understand the domain and find out the problem where you can effectively use like a in a NLP tool to solve that problem. And and another important part is that the amount of data you have, like what data you are starting with. Do you really need to collect more data, or can you solve this problem with like limited amount of data? All of these are very important. Thinking about the data is one of the main crucial components about towards the success of a data science project. Often we don't have sufficient data, or we are using like a model that probably is not fitted for the data, or maybe we are using
Hmm.
like too many things for a simple problem, and that's probably and that I think a majority of the time that is the reason why 80% of the data science project fails, because we are not doing the right thing. We're just doing the most popular thing. You shouldn't do that, right? Your strategy really will depend on your problem, amount of data you have, and maybe and actually it's true that often this rule based systems work pretty well, and
Hmm.
if it works well, you should just stick to that. You should not use the big guns just for the sake of using it. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's important to understand that, and you could get a lot of such insights from our book as well.
Anuj mentioned this thing in our last conversation that
Right.
you are trying to solve this problem of, like there are so many labor workers, like daily wage earners in India, and they want to apply for jobs, and they were building a system where using WhatsApp, you want to apply for a job, and they tried BERT and it failed horribly because the language, the slang that they are using is something BERT is not trained on. So it just simply doesn't work.
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, so eventually, if you just keep on using this model just like a black box, then it's gonna be difficult.
All right. So your book, you mentioned healthcare domain, retail, different domains. You have in book, you have mentioned different ideas. So maybe uh, Athanikar, if you are interested, maybe buy the book. You'll get a lot of different ideas in various domains where you can apply NLP. And anyone listening who have entrepreneurship dreams and you want to, do a startup in data science or AI, I think this book will provide you a lot of ideas. All right.
That's correct.
The
Yeah.
next question is Sarath. Tathikonda, how to land a job in Facebook as a fresher. Um, I think probably this person means maybe in the AI or general, like Facebook as a fresher. How do you get a job?
Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, it really depends the kind of role you are looking for. Are you looking for a software engineering role, or are you looking for like a data scientist role, or even like something like in the AI research? Again, it really depends. But I can talk about the kind of the research roles that are currently available in Facebook. Of course, you need to show that you are capable of doing research. I mean, and one of the good ways of showing that you have a couple of applications in the area that you are working with, or you have showed your research potential in somehow, for example, writing articles or blogs, meaningful things, and summarizing a lot of research papers. I think in general, as a software engineering, I think you would know better, I guess, because you are yeah, looking for a job, like as an
Software
entry level. Yeah,
software engineer, I will say, like nowadays these companies rely so much on competitive coding. So
yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
just
Yeah,
competitive coding, lit code, data structure, computer architecture. You need to be very, very strong in those. And there are
yeah,
some portals, they even provide services with like mock interviews. So if you pay some money, and I'm not marketing those companies, but mock interview, going through that mock interview experience really helps perform better during the actual
that's right.
interview.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
All
So
right.
yeah, exactly, like you said.
All right, let's tackle the last question now. Dipankar Rahul Day is asking how to learn NLP in step-by-step manner. I have used Spacey in my organizational projects like POS tagging, dependency parsing, text classification, phrase matching. It would be
Mm-hmm.
better to have a complete roadmap from an expert.
Yeah, I think yeah, I think that the answer is that you can just take a look at our book. As I said, that like the second section where we talk about a lot of basic NLP tasks, and we discuss Spacey along with other tools that you can use to learn this. So I think that's a great start. And not really only our book, but you can get like a lot of good tutorials, and there are a lot of good courses from Stanford, for example, that are available in Coursera that you can just subscribe and go through them. And it really depends on how much you want to go for it. Something you will find very interesting is basically in our book that there are lots of references, even if we don't discuss it, just because of it was out of the scope. But you can find a lot of references to good articles, materials, books, papers, and tutorials that you can go through if you really want to dig deep into that. So yeah.
And Dipankar, I'm also going to start a series on NLP because many of my viewers have asked me for. So watch out for that. My deep learning series is coming to an end almost, so I might start NLP series pretty soon. Well, thank you very much, Bodhisattva, for this awesome
Yeah.
conversation. I think you provided a lot of useful insights. Do you have any final, like, closing remarks?
Yeah, I would say that I think we are at the juncture of exciting times in AI, especially in NLP, because we are growing a lot faster. But I think what we should really be careful about using this AI meaningfully, like whenever we are applying, especially in user domains like healthcare and e-commerce, education, etc. But I think, yeah, I think we are all well aware of that, and lots of companies are working towards making these AI systems very safe, effective, bias free, etc. Right, and socially compatible. So yeah, I mean, I am very excited to be in this field at this point of time, and I'm sure you all will be. And thank you, Code Basics, for inviting me for this great conversation. Really enjoyed it, and hope these things will help some of you down the line. Thank you so
They
much.
will definitely. I myself learned a lot. Thank you very much. I will end this now. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.